From New York, this is Democracy Now!
If the vote were today, I believe he would win the electoral states that he would need. Because living out there, I will tell you, his level of support has not gone down 1 inch. In fact, I'd say it's even more rabid than it was before. Because they're afraid now. They're afraid he could lose because they watched his behavior.
Last week on Democracy Now!, acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore predicted Donald Trump would win re-election in 2020. His comments prompted President Trump to tweet, "He made same prediction in 2016. Nobody ever said Michael was stupid." But Michael Moore also noted that many working-class voters are women, people of color, and young adults, the real working class, who could help Democrats win in 2020.
The real reason the whole press has got this wrong about the reason we lost these 3 states that gave Trump the victory was because we lost Lunch Bucket Joe, you know, the old angry white guy, you know, working class. And it starts right there. It's the lie is by calling that the working class. The majority of the working class in this country are women. The majority are of color and they are young. The young 18 to 35 are paid the least amount of money of any age group. The women are still paid much less than men.
Today, we bring you part 2 of our interview with the acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo has condemned an attack against Jewish worshippers celebrating Hanukkah inside the home of a Hasidic rabbi in the New York suburb of Monsey.
This is violence spurred by hate. It is mass violence, and I consider this an act of domestic terrorism. Let's call it what it is. These people are domestic terrorists.
Witnesses say the attacker burst into Rabbi Chaim Rottenberg's home wielding a machete, stabbing 5 Jews among 100 who'd gathered to celebrate Hanukkah. Police say a suspect, 38-year-old Grafton Thomas, was arrested driving back along the George Washington Bridge. His lawyer and friends say Thomas has a long history of mental illness, including schizophrenia, and that he has no known history of anti-Semitism. All 5 victims of the stabbing have survived. One remains hospitalized with a skull fracture. The Hanukkah attack comes after a string of other attacks targeting the Jewish community in the New York region, including a fatal shooting at a kosher supermarket in Jersey City and the stabbing of a Jewish worshiper on his way to a synagogue in Monsey. The next morning in Texas, a gunman shot and killed 2 people at a church in White Settlement, Texas, outside Fort Worth. Police say the gunman opened fire during Sunday morning services at the West Freeway Church of Christ, fatally shooting 2 worshipers before being shot and killed by armed parishioners. This is Jeff Williams of the Texas Department of Public Safety.
This country has seen so many of these that we've actually gotten used to it to this point, and it's tragic, and it's a terrible situation, especially during the holiday season.
The United States launched airstrikes in Iraq and Syria Sunday, targeting what U.S. officials say is an Iran-backed paramilitary group. The U.S. airstrikes came after an American contractor was killed in a rocket attack on a military base in Kirkuk, Iraq, Friday. The U.S. airstrikes and the killing of the American contractor threaten a major escalation of tensions in the region. The spokesman for the Kataib Hezbollah militia says the U.S. airstrikes killed 25 people. This militia is not related to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Iran condemned the U.S. bombing as an act of terrorism and denied participating in attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq. Iraq has also condemned the U.S. airstrikes as a violation of Iraq's sovereignty. In more news from Syria, the United Nations says 250,000 people have fled the Russian-backed Syrian government offensive in the northwestern province of Idlib. Aid workers are now warning the offensive in Idlib could become the worst humanitarian crisis in the 9-year war in Syria. 3 million Syrian civilians live in Idlib, which is the last major Syrian territory controlled by anti-government rebel forces. The Pentagon says the United States carried out multiple airstrikes in Somalia Sunday following a deadly truck bombing in the capital, Mogadishu, that killed nearly 80 civilians. No group has taken responsibility for Saturday's deadly bombing, which also wounded nearly 150 people. Officials have blamed the attack on the militant group al-Shabaab. It was the worst attack in 2 years in Somalia. One day after the bombing, the Pentagon said it killed at least 4 people in airstrikes targeting al-Shabaab. The United States is carrying out an increasing number of airstrikes in Somalia, killing at least 800 people since April 2017. The Taliban's ruling council has agreed to a temporary ceasefire in Afghanistan, opening a window for the signing of a potential peace deal with the United States. The Trump administration's demanded a ceasefire as a precondition of signing the peace agreement, which comes amid start-and-stop negotiations between the U.S. and Taliban officials in Qatar. A peace deal could lead to the end of the U.S. war in Afghanistan, the longest war in U.S. history. In Yemen, at least 10 people were killed in a missile strike on a military parade for a United Arab Emirates-backed separatist group in southern Yemen Sunday. Officials blamed the strike on Houthi rebels, who've not yet responded to the allegations. The attack killed 6 troops and 4 children. In U.S. election news, Politico reports Democratic Party officials and insiders, including Hillary Clinton allies, now say it's possible Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders might win the party's presidential nomination. Party insiders had largely written off Sanders' campaign, but in recent weeks, some have reconsidered its chances as Sanders continues to rise in the polls, while candidates like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren have dropped in national and state surveys. Democratic California State Senator Scott Wiener told Politico Sanders has been, quote, more resilient than I anticipated. He has a very, very loyal following, and people have really stuck with him, unquote. The Washington Post says President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, held a back-channel phone call with the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, in September of 2018, which aimed to push Maduro out of power and open Venezuela up for business. Also on the call was then Texas Republican Congressmember Pete Sessions. The Washington Post reports the call was part of a shadow diplomatic effort backed by private business interests. In France, the nationwide strike against French President Emmanuel Macron's effort to overhaul the pension system and raise the retirement age has entered its 25th day, making it the longest strike in France in over 3 decades. This is Valérie Sepahi-Malani of the French Teachers Union.
It's not a secure method for the future, and over time it will impoverish pensioners. We want a system where we can plan for the future, that gives us assurances and allows for the maintaining of the purchasing power of pensioners, and so not the point system.
Ukrainian government forces and Russia-backed separatists completed a prisoner swap Sunday in eastern Ukraine. The office of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced at least 76 pro-government prisoners had been returned in exchange for over 120 pro-Russia detainees. Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed on the exchange during peace talks in Paris earlier this month. In more news on Ukraine, the White House says Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will meet with the Ukrainian President Zelensky on January 3rd in Kiev. It'll be Pompeo's first visit as Secretary of State to Ukraine and comes after the House impeached President Trump for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress related to his decision to withhold U.S. military aid to Ukraine to pressure Zelensky to investigate Trump's political rival, Joe Biden. Wildfires are continuing to rage in Australia, where a firefighter died Monday, and some in the southeastern state of Victoria were told it was too late to evacuate amidst worsening conditions and mass evacuations. Temperatures hit 104 degrees Fahrenheit across Australia today. Despite this year's unprecedented climate change-fueled fire season, Sydney officials say they will still hold New Year's Eve fireworks, but 250,000 people have signed on to a petition asking the Australian government to cancel the fireworks and give the money to firefighters and farmers and victims of the fires instead. In Georgia, a federal judge has backed the state's decision to purge nearly 100,000 names from the state's voter rolls, only months before the 2020 primary. The decision comes as state officials are already facing mounting accusations of voter suppression, particularly against Black and low-income communities. In Washington, D.C., comedy icon Lily Tomlin was arrested this weekend at a Fire Drill Friday protest on Capitol Hill, a weekly climate justice civil disobedience organized by the Oscar-winning actress Jane Fonda. The recent Fire Drill Friday came as youth activists also took to the streets around the world for the last Fridays for Future strike of this year. This is Jane Fonda speaking to fellow protesters on the steps of Capitol Hill.
The movement has been unbelievably successful. Already we've taken $11 trillion out of banks that are underwriting fossil fuel expansion.
To hear our full interview with Jane Fonda, go to democracynow.org. Civil rights leader and Democratic Georgia Congressmember John Lewis has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Congressmember Lewis is a civil rights legend. In 1965, he was beaten almost to death by Alabama state troopers as he attempted to lead a voting rights march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. On Sunday, Congressmember Lewis vowed to continue his work in Congress and said, quote, "I've been in some kind of fight for freedom, equality, basic human rights for nearly my entire life. I've never faced a fight quite like the one I have now," he said. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Today, we spend our second hour with acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore. Last Thursday, during an interview with Michael on Democracy Now!, he predicted Donald Trump would win re-election if Democrats fail to choose a candidate who excites their base of voters.
I think if the election were held today, Hillary won by 3 million popular votes. I believe whoever the Democrat is next year is going to win by 4 to 5 million popular votes. There's no question in my mind that people who stayed home, who sat on the bench, they're going to pour out in California, New York, and but also in Texas and whatever. I mean, places that Trump will probably win, but yet there's going to be a much higher percentage of people voting against him. The problem is that he will, if the vote were today, I believe he would win the electoral states that he would need, because living out there, I will tell you, his level of support has not gone down 1 inch. In fact, I'd say it's even more rabid than it was before, because they're afraid now. They're afraid he could lose because they watched his behavior. So they are voracious in their appetite for Donald Trump. That's the bad news.
So that was Michael Moore on Democracy Now! On Thursday. President Trump then tweeted his response to the show, saying, quote, "He made same prediction in 2016. Nobody ever said Michael was stupid." But Michael Moore said more. This was the rest of his comment.
The good news is, again, number one, never forget there's more of us than there are of them. The majority of the American people agree with us. 70% of the voters next year are women, people of color, and young adults. Okay? All that on our side. So what we have to do is we have to make sure we don't give them another Hillary Clinton to vote for.
So that was Michael Moore speaking on Democracy Now! On Thursday and getting that response from President Trump. Today, we play part 2 of our interview with Michael Moore, the Oscar-winning filmmaker. His most recent documentary, Fahrenheit 11/9, his other films include Michael Moore in Trumpland, Fahrenheit 9/11, Bowling for Columbine, Sicko, Capitalism, A Love Story, Where to Invade Next, and Roger and Me. He's just launched a new project, a podcast called Rumble with Michael Moore. Well, Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I spoke to Michael in our studio last week about a number of key issues in the 2020 presidential campaign: gun control, climate, and race. I started by asking about the Democratic presidential debate in Los Angeles earlier this month, when PBS moderator Amna Nawaz asked businessman Andrew Yang about being the only candidate of color on the debate stage, then asked Bernie Sanders the same question.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. Senator Sanders, I do want to put the same question to you, Senator Sanders. What message do you think?
To that question, but I wanted to get back to the issue of climate change for a moment, because I do believe this is the existential issue.
Senator, with all respect, this question is about race. Can you answer the question as it was asked?
I certainly can. Because people of color, in fact, are going to be the people suffering most if we do not deal with climate change. And by the way, we have an obligation up here, if there are not any of our African-American brothers and sisters up here, to speak about an economy in which African-Americans are exploited, where black women die 3 times at higher rates than white women, where we have a criminal justice system which is racist and broken, disproportionately made up of African Americans and Latinos and Native Americans who are in jail. So we need an economy that focuses on the needs of oppressed, exploited people, and that is the African American community.
So that's Bernie Sanders responding to the PBS moderator, the first Muslim American moderator of a debate, Amna Nawaz, in the Los Angeles Democratic presidential debate that had one person of color left, although there are a few more that are in the presidential primaries, Cory Booker and Julian Castro. Michael Moore.
Well, first of all, I know Bernie, so he didn't get to finish his climate change thing from before, and he is like a dog with a bone with an issue. So he wanted to finish his climate change, and he wasn't listening to the new question. But that's Bernie. He's like, this is the thing that's going to kill all of us, and I have to finish my last sentence of what I was going to say about this. I understand that, but I thought this is it's a teachable moment that.
But of course, she was also pointing to a vulnerability on his part, which is how much support he has in the African American community.
Well, he has the poll last week shows that Bernie Sanders is now polling at number 1. He has more voters in favor of him, non-white voters, than any of the other candidates. He's number 1 in the polls with Black, Hispanic, and Native American and Asian voters. That's just the truth. The majority of people of color in the polls so far want Bernie Sanders. He's been number 1 with the Hispanic vote since the beginning. I don't think he's ever not been. There's not been a poll this year where he hasn't been number 1. So it's it stung a little to watch that. I mean, it was, but because I know, doesn't anybody have a grandparent? I mean, seriously, once they've got to finish their thought, and he didn't get to finish his thought, and he was going to finish his thought. But that's who you want. You want that person in that debate with Trump, even though I don't think Trump will do a debate. I think he'll refuse to debate. That's my gut feeling.
For all the candidates, or if it was Bernie Sanders, you don't think he would debate Joe Biden?
No, I think he'll try to avoid the debates. He does not want certain. See, he doesn't control the microphone at the debate, like at the rally. So, and because you see, we still are thinking, oh, it's normal. So there's going to be a debate. Elizabeth Warren, she's going to kill him in the debate. And I say to Bill, there's not going to be a debate. You're the same people who were thinking we were going to get the tax returns. He was never going to give the tax returns. He's still not giving the tax returns, and his court is not going to make him give the tax returns. So stop thinking like it's normal. Even we still do that. It's not normal. Things will not be that way. And I think. We need a fighter like that, and we need somebody who will not be diverted. He was not done with his sentence of climate change, and that's what he was focused on.
Well, can I just ask you though, Michael? I mean, a lot of people are now suspicious of polls for obvious reasons following 2016. What about the fact? So, first of all, we don't know how reliable those polls will be, especially a year from now,
Correct.
Or almost a year from now, and also the fact that a lot of centrist Democrats think that Sanders is far too left-wing and that a democratic socialist could never be the president of the United States.
What those centrist Democrats are really saying is they think the American public is far too left-wing. Because it's not just one poll, it's every poll shows that the majority of Americans believe women should have control over their reproductive system, not men, not the government, nobody.
Including Catholic women. You're Catholic.
Including Catholics, that's correct.
But all Democrats would say that, every Democratic presidential candidate.
Well, yes, and they would all say that we need a raise in the minimum wage, that mass incarceration is an issue, et cetera, et cetera. But just do a gut check. Who do you believe will actually not relent, not compromise? Right away, we were so happy to get Barack Obama elected. He appoints Larry Summers and Timothy Geithner to run our economy. Larry Summers from Goldman Sachs. Geithner was the head of the New York Fed. They're part of the problem. He appoints these two guys to run our Treasury and our economy. That was like I couldn't believe it. And it was like and then for 2 years, we had the majority of the House and the Senate. And we could have gotten a lot done, but he wanted to go slow. He wanted to compromise with the Republicans. He wanted to kumbaya this thing. And look what happened. He got one thing through, Obamacare, a half measure, not what we really need, not true health care, true universal health care. 50 million have been uninsured before Obamacare. They brag about how now there's 20 million more that have health insurance. Well, there's 30 more million that don't still with Obamacare. So, look, I love Barack Obama, but as I showed in my last film, he came to Flint and he drank the water.
Generally, I have not been doing stunts here, but, and this used a filter. The water around this table, was Flint water that was filtered.
That's Barack Obama.
That's Barack
taking that glass of water.
Yes.
And drinking it.
And telling people it's okay to drink the poison water. And it was a knife through the heart of especially the African-American community in Flint. Nobody could believe it. Now, they're not going to criticize him publicly. We're certainly not going to go for Trump.
Deeply thankful he came to Flint.
Yes, and hopeful that he was going to have the Army Corps of Engineers come in and dig up the pipes and get rid of the awful situation instead. And this is May of 16.
Of course, we're talking about your city,
yes.
Michael Moore, Flint, Michigan.
Yes. And people left that gymnasium that day, and I knew what was going to happen, and it is what happened. In Flint, a few months later at the election, 8,000 roughly African Americans who had voted twice for Obama in 08 and 12 stayed home. 8,000. She lost the whole state by 10,000.
Hillary.
They
even had one of their last debates there, didn't they, in Flint,
Well, that's
Michigan?
the other thing that doesn't get discussed. Like, how could she lose Michigan? Why did African Americans refuse to support her? Because all we've heard for how many decades? The black people love the Clintons. Remember that old awful thing? He playing the sax on Arsenio, and then people saying he was our first black president. Remember that? That was I was just always sounded so offensive. And the truth is at the debate in Flint between Hillary and Bernie, someone at CNN gave Hillary the questions in advance so she would know what the questions are. So here you have
Donna Brazile, right?
Donna Brazile. Here you have there was a group of mothers at the microphone in Whiting Auditorium in Flint to ask Hillary and Bernie about the water situation. And not knowing that Hillary already knew they were going to ask this question or two. Bernie didn't know. Hillary knew. A month later, when it was revealed that Hillary had their questions before they asked them, the women at that microphone went on TV. They said they felt like they were used like props by the Democrats, by the Hillary campaign. And it was so offensive, again, to the community, to the larger community, but also especially to the black community in Flint, that is just more of the same. Of course, they take us for granted. We're going to vote for the Democrat. Now we're used as props in a nationwide debate where it was rigged, where one of the candidates knew the questions, to a town and to a group of people who have been so abused and suffered for decades now, and now have been put through a poisoning where all children under the age of 6, because if you drink lead at that age, you have permanent lifetime brain damage. There's no medicine. There's no cure. There's nothing that can be done to help them. All of these women and these parents, children have been poisoned. And to be treated that way by the Hillary campaign. I know some people watch this and go, well, yes, but you had to vote. You had to stop Trump. There comes a time when the boot has been on your neck for so long you can't breathe, and you have decided, I'm tapping out. I'm out. I'm not voting for any of these people anymore. And that's what happened. And not just in Flint, but in Detroit, in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, in Philly, in Pennsylvania.
That's acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore. In the latest U.S. election news, Politico is reporting Democratic Party officials and insiders, including Hillary Clinton allies, now say it's possible Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders might win the party's presidential nomination. Party insiders had largely written off Sanders' campaign, but in recent weeks, some have reconsidered his chances as Sanders continues to rise in the polls, while candidates like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren have dropped in national and state surveys. Democratic California State Senator Scott Wiener told Politico Sanders has been, quote, more resilient than I anticipated. He has a very, very loyal following, and people have really stuck with him, unquote. We'll have more with Michael Moore in a minute.
Took a trip to San Francisco. All our friends said we would drive. Didn't work, so I left for Fresno. It was quite a scenic drive. Pulled over to watch the children in the park. We used to only worry for them after dark. I'm still looking for my own version of America. One without the gun, where the flag can freely fly. No bombs in the sky, only fireworks when you and I collide. It's just a dream I had in mind. It's just a dream I had in mind. It's just a dream I had in mind. I flew back.
Looking for America by Lana Del Rey. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman as we continue our conversation with acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore about the Democratic debates, the 2020 elections, and more. Michael Moore explained to Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I what he means when he refers to the working-class voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, key states Trump won in the 2016 election.
The real reason, the whole press has got this wrong about the reason we lost these three states that gave Trump the victory was because we lost Lunch Bucket Joe, you know, the old angry white guy, you know, working class. And it starts right there. It's the lie is by calling that the working class. And then we're supposed to imagine, yeah, I watched the Monday Night Football last night. That's what working class is. That's a lie. The majority of the working class in this country are women. The majority are of color, and they are young. The young, 18 to 35, are paid the least amount of money of any age group. The women are still paid much less than men. And, of course, if you're of color, you know, you already know this. You've been on the bottom of the economic ladder forever. So none of this should be a surprise. But when you hear working class from now on, I beg people, the image I want in your head is not, you know, the angry factory guy coming out of work. I want you to think that it's a 35-year-old black woman. That is the average working class person in this country. It is a person of color. It is a woman, and that person is young. And that is the base. That is the way to win the election. But they aren't going to go for it anymore. If you're just the same old. You know, how could Trump get 53% of the white female vote? I mean, that's only because enough of poorer other white voters, women, just said, this isn't for me. This doesn't affect my life. The largest party in America is the non-voter party. It's over 100 million strong. And all we need are a few million of them to have a sense that, you know what, this candidate is going to fight for me. This candidate is not going to sell out. Look at all that. Look at all the Democrats on that stage. And let me tell you, there's something I can say something good about every one of them. But tell me the one. Point out the one who will never sell out, who will never cave in, who will fight all the way I think that's Bernie.
Well, let's go back to the Democratic presidential debate in Los Angeles last week. One of the most heated exchanges of the evening came when Senator Elizabeth Warren criticized Mayor Pete Buttigieg for holding a closed-door fundraiser in what she called a wine cave.
The mayor just recently had a fundraiser that was held in a wine cave full of crystals and served $900 a bottle wine. Think about who comes to that.
According to Forbes magazine, I am literally the only person on this stage who's not a millionaire or a billionaire. So this is important. This is the problem with issuing purity tests you cannot yourself pass.
I do not sell access to my time. I don't do call time with millionaires and billionaires.
Sorry, as of when, Senator?
I don't meet behind closed doors with big dollar donors. And look, I've taken one that ought to be an easy step for everyone here. I've said to anyone who wants to donate to me, if you want to donate to me, that's fine. But don't come around later expecting to be named ambassador.
Senator, your presidential campaign right now, as we speak, is funded in part by money you transferred, having raised it at those exact same big-ticket fundraisers you now denounce. Did it corrupt you, Senator? Of course not.
So that's from last week's Democratic presidential debate in Los Angeles. Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Elizabeth Warren. Your response, the wine cave.
I was just saying while we were listening to that the Oxford Dictionary, they picked the word of the year, and they probably already have done it for 2019, but I really think wine cave should be the word of the year. Yeah, it's probably two words, but I would, just mash it into one. Well, good for her for calling him out on it. I'm very disappointed in the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and the things that I've heard him say and how he's now trying to be the centrist candidate. But we could do another show on just him and South Bend. South Bend's city limits essentially almost a butt by like a half a mile from the borderline of the state of Michigan. So we all know South Bend. It's also the home of Notre Dame, one of the most conservative colleges in America. But he was also right to point out some of the things about her, that she has come late to some things. As I said, she voted for Republicans, and I know why she's saying this. She says this every time, that 2 of her 3 brothers are Republicans. I believe 1 or 2 of her kids, has voted Republican. If you're trying to convince Republicans to vote for you and you're Elizabeth Warren, you're way to the left, too far to the left for Republicans. They're not going to vote for you. Focus on the base. Focus on the non-voters, the have-nots of our society. They can vote, and they will vote for you. And I'll tell you what we did in Michigan between the 2016 election and the off-year election last year in 2018. We threw Republicans out, but we came at it, my friends and I and others decided after we lost, it's because it's hugely embarrassing that Michigan would go, red. I mean, I can't even tell you the level of humiliation that caused.
There's something funny calling Michigan red.
Yes, right. Yes, not right. It's just not right. All right. The home of the labor movement and everything that Michigan has given the world.
Michael, is this the new red baiting?
Well, it's funny because they take it from Tim Russert in the 2000 that night, where he had the liberal or Gore states in red. I'm sorry, in blue, and the Republicans in red. So for anybody our age or older, it's very funny to think that the Republicans are reds, but I think that was good. They should mix it up a little bit. People shouldn't be afraid of having the debate. Democrats get nervous. They go, oh, no, don't attack each other. It's not an attack. It's a legitimate discussion about where's your money coming from. And I think that we should know that. They should talk about it, and people shouldn't be afraid. Look, I think everybody, probably not, I mean, there's probably people watching this show that are going to vote Green Party no matter what. There are people watching the show that are anarchists and have just given up on the whole thing and aren't going to vote for anybody. But I think most of the people I know are going to vote for whoever has the D by their name next year. Of these remaining candidates, like you said, they all pretty much kind of support the same thing. George Wallace is not on the stage, so so I think that people shouldn't be nervous. People are going to vote for the Democrat. More people voted. What I was saying about last November in the off year, we decided that stop relying on candidates to get the vote out. Politicians doesn't work a lot, especially with Democrats. Well, let's get ballot proposals on. So we got 2 ballot proposals on the ballot last November. One to legalize marijuana, and I mean really legalize it. And number 2, we to make voter suppression and gerrymandering a crime and put it in the Constitution. Both passed by around 60%.
In Michigan. In
Michigan, in the state that voted for Trump. Both passed. Now, what did that do? Putting those on the marijuana ballot proposal, we almost doubled the turnout of the youth vote from the last off-year election in 2014 because of that ballot proposal. And African Americans who had stayed away from Hillary, stayed away from the ballot box, or left the top box blank, they came out and voted to make gerrymandering and voter suppression a crime. If you have the chance to actually make a law, make it part of the Constitution, you're going to show up. That's what happened. And because such a large number of African Americans and young people showed up to vote, we had a Republican governor, we had a Republican lieutenant governor, we had a Republican secretary of state, and we had a Republican attorney general, and they were all booted. No Republicans allowed in any. And who were they replaced with? A woman governor, a black lieutenant governor, a lesbian attorney general, and a single mom to be Secretary of State. No white guys at all in the top government of Lansing, Michigan. And we threw out 2 Republican members of Congress in suburban Detroit, the ones up there who, represent Lunch Bucket Joe. We threw them out and replaced them with Democratic women. And I saw how if we do these things like ballot proposals, whatever, we can really affect change and have a good outcome next November.
Michael, I want to ask you about primary caucus order and ask if you think this is important. Last month, I had the chance to co-moderate a presidential forum on environmental justice at South Carolina State in Orangeburg with Mustafa Santiago Ali, who is the vice president of the National Wildlife Federation. You were talking about, the 2 first caucus primary states, Iowa and New Hampshire, and why they're determining so much of the outcome. I asked the question to Senator Elizabeth Warren. Speaking about racial injustice, do you think the order of the primary states should change? You have Iowa and New Hampshire, 2 of the whitest states in the country. And then we move to South Carolina with a very significant population of people of color. And it means the candidates spend so much of their time catering to those first 2 states. Overall, do you think that should change?
Look, I'm just a player in the game on this one.
I'm just a player in the game, Senator Warren said. Now, again, you have these 2 states, Iowa and New Hampshire. It's not as if tomorrow's Iowa, the next day is New Hampshire, and the next day is South Carolina, so you have a little more, so you have 24 hours to run in those states. It's now expanded, the pre-primary season, to like 2 years. We then interviewed the head of the Democratic Party of Texas, who said that he's been trying to get these candidates to a forum in Texas, one of the largest states in the country, and they all say, we can't. We're doing Iowa. He said, could you imagine if we took the same number of people of the population of Iowa, the Rio Grande Valley, and for 2 years the candidates went up and down this largely Latino area, and they just, every single town, village, hamlet, and water fountain they stood by. He said the whole country would be in an uproar. He can't get people to Texas, these presidential candidates. What do you say about the primary order, and whether, in fact, it's leading to what we have now? Now you have the presidential debate. One person of color is left, Andrew Yang, in the last presidential debate.
I think people of color know that the Democratic Party has talked a good line, has occasionally done good things, but they know that the loyalties of the Democratic Party ultimately are going to be for whatever the status quo is, whether that's racially, whether that's to the people who have money, who fund campaigns, et cetera. And I'm sitting here still a little disappointed in Elizabeth Warren that was her answer. The answer was, and just if you can for a moment imagine what Bernie's answer would be, he wouldn't be sitting there thinking, I can't upset the people of New Hampshire or Iowa. He would have said it, just said it. No, it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. Those two states do not represent what this country really looks like. And the fact that it's still going on after all this time, I hope this is the last time that this happens, where it starts with those two states. The fact that the person you mentioned from Texas can't get these Democrats to come to Texas, I mean, that's stunning. As I was pointing out how, the demographic is changing. This will not be a white majority country in the 2040s. We already have 4 states now that are not white. We already have 4 states that are not white. Obvious ones like Hawaii, New Mexico. The giveaway, the clue is in the name, New Mexico. But California Texas. Recently, and Texas is 57% not white.
In California?
And California, just in the last month or two, the demographic it's like 51-49, something like that. It's close, but it has up until this year been about 50-50, but now it's not. But 57%, Texas is one of our largest non-white states. Why is it ignored? Why is it Republican dominated? Between the 57% that are Latino and black, then add in all the white women, this should be a Democratic state, hands down. What's going on here? I mean, throw in the 18 to 35-year-old white males. Again, you've got even then a larger pot you're dealing with here. It's wrong. It's racially wrong, and I hope it changes. But when Bernie's elected and we have a chair of the DNC, should be a co-chair, by the way, should be a man and a woman. Co-chairing the DNC, and they should, Howard Dean mentioned this years ago about a 50-state strategy, and it sounded crazy, and yet it really is the way to go. We should leave no state behind in this, this should change.
But how is it that the order of the primaries and caucuses was decided in the first place?
I don't think any thought really went into it. I just think the state legislature in New Hampshire set an early date. I used to think when I was a kid, wow, that's kind of a cruel joke to make the candidates come and campaign in January in New Hampshire. We'll see how tough they are, right? But then Iowa got involved, and they don't have a primary; they have a caucus, but I think that why did anything get started? If it benefits white people, it's a good thing. They're not going to, like you said, they're not going to go down to a place where there are too many people that don't have this skin. That's just been verboten for a long time, and now it's probably more rigid with some people because white people are not comfortable with the fact that they are going to lose power in their lifetime, and so they're doing whatever they can to kind of try to keep it going.
Oscar-winning filmmaker Michael Moore, back with him on gun massacres at home and war abroad. Stay with us. Essay by Faya. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. As we continue our conversation with the acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore, this is a trailer of his 2002 film Bowling for Columbine, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature.
He's Michael Moore, America's favorite whistleblower, the man in everyone's face, the guy asking the question, are we a nation of gun nuts or just plain nuts?
My name was second highest on the bomb threat list, which kind of made me mad.
Why? Because you didn't make it to number one?
It would have been kind of like an ego thing there, you know, knowing that I was number one at something.
I loves my gun. Loves my gun.
I'm here to open up an account.
Okay, what type of account?
I want the account where I can get the free gun.
You do a CD and we'll hand you a gun.
Well, here's my first question. Do you think it's a little dangerous handing out guns in a bank?
Now he's taking aim at America's most controversial subject.
Why do you think we have so many gun murders in America?
Because everybody's first reaction is pull the gun out.
The town of Virgin, Utah has passed a law requiring all residents to own guns.
This is a great place to raise your children.
There has been a terrible shooting.
After Columbine, no one could figure out why the boys have resorted to violence.
Why would kids do this?
You don't think kids say Dad goes off to the factory every day. He built missiles. What's the difference between that and the mass destruction at Columbine High School?
I guess I don't see that connection.
United Artists presents the sensation of the 2002 Cannes Film Festival and the only film to win a unanimous jury prize.
And then Moses himself showed up.
From my cold, dead hands.
10 days after the Columbine killing, Charlton Heston came to Denver and held a large pro-gun rally.
How could the NRA come here? To me, it's like they're rubbing their nose in it.
Mr. Heston, I'm a member of the NRA. I was wondering if maybe I could talk to you about the whole gun issue.
Critics are calling it scathing, incendiary, hilarious, and provocative.
Our children had turned into little monsters. But who was to blame?
What were the suspects doing the morning of attack? I'd heard that they were bowling.
Bowling for Columbine.
Why wasn't anyone blaming bowling for warping their minds?
A movie that will have you up in arms.
Thank you for not shooting.
So that's your 2002 documentary, Bowling for Columbine. But speaking of guns, the Senate recently passed a $1.4 trillion spending package to avoid a government shutdown. The package includes a $738 billion defense bill, one of the most expensive military bills in U.S. history. The spending package also includes $1.4 billion for Trump's border wall and allocates $25 million for gun violence research for the first time in 20 years. Michael.
Well, that last part is good because the NRA has fought and kept Congress from approving any money to study why we have this epidemic. It is an epidemic. No other countries like this. They're not better than us. The Canadians have the same 23 chromosomes in every cell that we have. Why don't they shoot each other at the rate that we shoot each other? They have a lot of guns, by the way. It's a country of hunters. So there are guns. They don't kill each other. It should have been studied a long time ago, you know. And sometimes it's the simplest things. Because first of all, these mass shootings in schools, they don't happen in the inner cities, do they? They don't happen in the inner city schools. They happen in rural and suburban communities, by and large. When the night that the gunman was atop the hotel in Las Vegas, firing essentially machine gun fire on a crowd of 20,000 people. CNN broke in. I was watching. I was watching Anthony Bourdain. You know, sometimes I wish I cooked, but I don't, so I can watch it on TV. Having said that, CNN breaks in. Breaking news: we believe there's a gunman on one of the top floors of the hotel. And I thought, first thought was, how do you know it's a man? Why'd you say gunman? Of course, I'm being facetious. Of course, it's a gunman. We already know, without finding out who's doing this, no woman is up there with a machine gun spraying bullets on a crowd of 20,000 people. I'd like to study that. I'd like to find out why that is, because clearly we are safe from 51% of the population. They will not jump out on the street and shoot you. In fact, and when they do, whenever, like 11 o'clock news here in New York, you know, if it comes on that a woman has shot a guy, you know, your first thought is, whoa, what did he do? You know, I mean, it's like...
And it's also overwhelmingly a white man.
It's overwhelmingly white men, white young men that are doing these mass shootings, and that should be studied. So that's a good thing. But all the other things you mentioned, more money for the military, wrong. Also in that bill, they created the Space Force.
Oh, yes, that's right.
The Space Force. Are you friggin' kidding me? And the Democrats went along with that? Oh, man. Okay, that's another show. But
Michael, I want to go to Oscar night in 2003. This is in the midst of the bombing of Iraq.
It's the fourth night of the Iraq War, and I'm there because Bowling for Columbine has been nominated. And so the context of what you're going to see is within...
And, of course, not only nominated, but, well, after Diane Lane announces you'd won for Best Documentary Feature, you invited your fellow nominees on stage and gave this famous speech.
On behalf of our producers, Kathleen Glynn and Michael Donovan from Canada, I'd like to thank the Academy for this. I've invited my fellow documentary nominees on the stage with us, and we would like to... They are here in solidarity with me because we like nonfiction. We like nonfiction, and we live in fictitious times. We live in a time where we have fictitious election results that elects a fictitious president. We live in a time where we have a man sending us to war for fictitious reasons, whether it's the fictition of duct tape or the fictitious of orange alerts. We are against this war, Mr. Bush. Shame on you, Mr. Bush. Shame on you. And anytime you've got the Pope and the Dixie Chicks against you, your time is up. Thank you very much.
Your time's up, he said to Mr. Bush. Well, that was Michael Moore getting both cheers and boos at the 75th Academy Awards in 2003. Just days into the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, ushered off the stage after just 60 seconds. You didn't quite get to finish what you had to say, but last year, Michael, at the Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, more than 15 years later, you completed your Oscar speech.
That's right. Actually, that last year they gave me their Lifetime Achievement Award, and they had Robert De Niro present it to me. It was a really nice night, and I thought, you know what I wanted? That day I looked and I found the actual speech I'd written, and the next 30 seconds or so that I didn't get to say. And so I said, my speech tonight is I'm going to finish my Oscar speech when I got cut off by the producer of the show who did not want me saying what I was saying. And so I read the rest of the speach.
And the rest of the speech was?
I would have brought it with me, actually, if I'd known you were going to ask this. It was basically to tell people not to give up. I realized the audience I was speaking to, remember, the first week of the war, Bush had a 70% approval rating. And the war had a 70% approval rating. And 29 Democratic U.S. senators voted in favor of the war. The New York Times gave us the war through their ill reporting of telling the American public there was weapons of mass destruction there when there wasn't.
Including Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden.
And John Kerry.
Interestingly,
yes.
Donald Trump, not President Trump, but like more than 10 years ago, was talking about the impeachment of Clinton and said, you know, this is ridiculous, but said it's Bush who should be impeached for the Iraq War.
Yes, I did this. I should probably say this publicly, but I think it's maybe it's because I was raised by Jesuits who are always, you know, questioning things. And so one day I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I think the way we defeat our enemy is not by going, ooh, boo, enemy. You know, it's like understanding them, learning about them, and even embracing them. In the way that in the famous movie George C. Scott playing General Patton after he defeats Rommel, and then screams at him, "I read your book," you know, and everybody was asking, "Why are you reading Rommel's book?" Ooh, Nazi. Yeah, but I want to understand him. Oh, I don't want to understand him. Yes, you do, because you want to defeat him. So I thought, you know what would be a good exercise? Well, maybe we can all do this at home now here that the show is almost over. Get out a piece of paper or your device and make a list of the things that you actually like about Donald J. Trump. Oh, no, I don't like anything. Yes, you do. Yes, you do, because you need to understand why some people are voting for him. I'm not talking about the racists. I'm not talking about the, maybe 50% of his vote is at least a racial vote. But I'm talking about those things like you just said, that he came out and spoke out against the Iraq war. He said Bush should have been impeached for the Iraq war. Or think of the times that he's told the truth. Well, we focus on his 15,000 lies or whatever.
I think it's 23 or something, 23,000.
Is it up to 20? Oh, my God. I stopped counting. But when he said I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it, he is telling you the truth. So make a little list of the truth-telling moments when we didn't like what he was saying, or we thought he was being a buffoon, but actually he was trying to signal to us the truth, his truth, of what he was really going to do, what he really stands for, what he really believes in. And I'm going to publish this. Now that I've said this publicly, I'm going to publish this little list I made because it's quite telling in terms of why. I know people say I don't want to watch him in the rallies and all this, but you almost have to, like a train wreck. You can't take your eyes off it. And then and he's gotten so good at his performance art, because that's what he is. He's a performance artist. Doesn't believe in anything. First time I ran into him when I moved to New York back in the 90s was at a Planned Parenthood fundraiser. Okay? I mean, he hung around with Democrats. He gave money. I'm telling you, this guy, he doesn't believe in Democrats or Republicans. He believes in Donald J. Trump. He is the ultimate narcissist. I think it's really important to try and figure him out and that in that way that will defeat him. Don't avoid him. I know it's painful. Try to connect with those, because if you've ever laughed at something like at a Trump joke, you're a collaborator, and you can't help it, because sometimes he's funny. Sometimes he does weird mic drops. He walks away from the microphone now and he prances the stage, and it's like, oh my God. It's not funny as in he's got a great sense of humor. You can't help but laugh. And this is no laughing matter.
Acclaimed filmmaker Michael Moore. He's hosting a new podcast. It's called Rumble with Michael Moore. You can watch the first hour of our interview at democracynow.org. Also, tune into our New Year's Day special Wednesday. This coming year, 2020, marks the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which guarantees women the right to vote. We begin the new decade with our hour-long special about one of the most influential women in U.S. politics, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. After the death of her husband, President Franklin Roosevelt, she spearheaded the UN Declaration of Human Rights. President Harry Truman called her the First Lady of the world. And in case you missed it, go to Democracy Now! For our remembrance of Toni Morrison. This is Oprah Winfrey reading Toni Morrison's words.
Can't you see? We got a home right here in this rock, don't you see? We got a home in this rock, and if I got a home, you got one too. So grab it. Grab this land. Take this land. Hold this land, my brothers. Ain't nobody crying in my home. I want you to take this land, make it, my brothers, shake it, squeeze it, turn it, twist it, beat it, kick it, kiss it, whip it, stomp it, dig it, plow it, seed it, reap it, rent it, buy it, sell it, own it, build it, multiply it, and pass it on. You hear me? Do you hear me? Pass it on. Thank you.
Oprah Winfrey reading the words of Toni Morrison. You can watch the full Toni Morrison Remembrance at democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.